Okay. I was looking for something easier. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, for this lab report in particular, so this one was new. It's never been done before, and in my personal opinion, I think it's a little bit too much too fast for the very first semester of chemistry. They're useful skills and they're not that difficult, especially if you have a background in it, but it's just a bit too much, I think. Especially because in comparison, the other labs are a lot easier. So I don't think I don't think anyone here is unintelligent. I think that's not I don't think that it's difficult for that reason. I think that there's too many things introduced, and so it's just not a nice progression. She should have done something more like that, at least not at the very beginning, maybe more towards the end. That's my personal opinion, just because there was not only were a lot of you guys completely new to using Excel in general, on top of that, there's a lot of new concepts introduced, and it's not the chemistry concepts, it really is just working with Excel and figuring out the formulas that made it difficult. So that's my personal opinion. And for that reason, also, that's kind of a big impetus or incentive for me to, to give you guys something new and to ask more questions about it. Yeah, I guess those are all my comments and questions. So if you guys have questions, technically the first 30 minutes is supposed to be for that exclusively, and we can always move on, but today's lab is actually really simple. Anyone want to try answering that question? How do you calculate uncertainty? And then meanwhile, I'll take attendance, but if no one answers, I mean, I'll do it.
Yeah, so it's actually in the lab, right? I think it was like delta D equals plus minus density square root of the value of delta D over density squared, and then plus the value of delta V over volume, and then all that squared. Sorry, I'm going off my memory. I'm pretty sure that's how it was. Let me double check.
So it depends on what you mean by uncertainty. A student just before class emailed me how to regain the uncertainty associated with the density and volume values. So uncertainty here, we're calling it uncertainty. Basically, uncertainty is a synonym in this case for variance. Variance is like a bigger term. And there are multiple ways to calculate variance. And in fact, just in the pre-lab that you guys did, or for the homework for this lab report, you guys had to calculate 2 forms of uncertainty or 2 forms of variance. And that was the standard, so the standard deviation intervals, and then the confidence intervals. Those are both giving you a range. And in particular with the confidence interval, actually for standard deviation too, it's also giving you a degree of certainty within that range, but also of course the true value might lie in that range. So I'm saying that because if you're asking how did we calculate uncertainty from the very beginning regarding volumes and masses, I don't know, because it was just given to us. But that could have been done in a few ways. I'm guessing that was probably, if you were to do this in person, that probably was just a standard deviation thing. Like they probably took 3 trials. They took the thing 3 times, they took the mass 3 times, they took the volume 3 times, and they got some variation there. And then they took the standard deviation of their 3 trials, and then they reported the average as the value, and then the variation, their standard deviation was the uncertainty. That's a guess. I have no idea if that's true, but that's one way it could be true. And what Rowan was talking about for the uncertainty later, he was talking about the propagation. So I'm not even looking at the chat right now, because I don't know if you asked.
Hey Dylan, I think the uncertainty for the volume and mass is actually explained in the lab itself.
Did they do that?
It was saying that the graduate cylinder, or 25 milliliter graduate cylinder, usually has an uncertainty of like 0.01, I think.
Cool.
And then technically they were supposed to use weight paper, so that has an uncertainty that's set also. I'm guessing they probably just use a balance, but.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, it makes it even simpler. That's something we do in analytical lab too, where they're accounting in this case for instrumental uncertainty, which is nice because then you can just take one measurement and then that's it. When I taught analytical, this is something we'd go over a lot. Usually the instrumental uncertainty is less than what you're going to see for your experimental uncertainty. So it just depends, but that's good to know. So, well, there you go. There's the uncertainty. So you don't need to calculate. In that case, it's just given to you, and it's associated with the instrument. But for the density uncertainty, Rowan also answered that question. You seem to look at.
Yeah, that's in the calculations portion on number 2.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So for that one, is it delta or is it the uncertainty of mass? Because in like the lab, they have in parentheses that the triangle on the M is the uncertainty of mass, not like the change in mass.
Rowan, do you want to answer that question? Looks like you just unmuted yourself.
Yeah, so it's explained in the lab too. Yeah, that's the uncertainty of mass. So all of them are gonna have the same uncertainty mass-wise, and then all of them is gonna have the same uncertainty volume-wise. So it should be the same in all data points. In that case, it's pretty much a constant. So.
Cool. There's a ton of stuff in chat, and I'm not looking over because I'm trying to take attendance while going through this too. So I'm not reading all the questions, but I'm going to try to do that now.
Hey Dylan, the only problem I had was it seems like the way this lab was supposedly set up at the beginning is that your group does an experiment and then you share data with other groups and then you get 12 data points all together. So I kind of went along that line of thinking. So all my calculations are for the group is going to be just a data point I picked. And then for the class are all the data points together. So the average density. Or am I wrong in that thinking?
I didn't clarify that before you guys came in. So you could do that. It makes it more difficult for me in terms of the grading, but I don't know how, it's probably gonna be pretty easy to grade anyway. But for me, I'm just gonna look, I'll backtrack and I'll see what your calculations are, and if it makes sense, then it's fine for me. So it's okay. I don't want you to have to retroactively do it. My interpretation of it was that they give us both of those already. So they give us like class data in table 1.2, and they give us our like individual group data. And yeah, you're right. So if we were to do this, we would have like groups of like usually two to three. And then we check individual things, and then we put everything together on the board. Everyone takes that stuff down, and then we use all the class data to get our stats that we're basically doing, because most of this lab is just doing like statistical analysis to get density. I mean, the density calculation is really easy, right? Just mass over volume. The challenges here are working with the more simple statistics that we're doing. And then that.
Yeah, so the only problem I was running into is that each data point has a slot for uncertainty that you're supposed to calculate. So what I ended up just doing was making a column in Excel for calculating uncertainty for each data point, and then I just propagated it down, and then I copied that over. But I don't know if like we actually had to do all of that. I mean, technically, we should have only had to calculate one uncertainty, right? Because that's our group's experiment, and then we share data with the other groups, which they should have their own uncertainty that we can copy down. But
yeah, that's actually a great question. So I did them for each individual data point too, actually. It's pretty easy with Excel because we just do one. I mean, you can drag it along. So that's why it was pretty simple. Because we didn't run it in a real group, I'm not exactly sure. They should have, I wish they had done this. I mentioned this a few times in the email, and again, it's an opinion, so take it or leave it. I wish that the data section on the lab report was called data and results. No, I'm sorry, I wish the results section was called data and results, because the results don't mean a whole lot if you don't have the data to show me what it means. And the table 1.3 at the end that showcases the group and class data is kind of like the results for this entire lab. In that case, based off of that, I think that I would just, well, I'll just look at what you did. But I think, I'm used to when I grade expecting one for analytical, expecting one answer in a very, very narrow range around that one answer. But for Gen Chem traditionally, I'll talk to Dr. Fuller about this. There's a little bit more, there's the variance, the uncertainty is higher, and I can accept higher ranges. So, or more variation on that range. So when I grade this myself, because there's multiple ways to answer the question, and this is kind of like a roundabout way to address your question. But it does address it. It's just when I don't know the true value, I mean, when I don't know the correct way, that's indicating, because I'm going off the lab menu like you, that there's going to be some multiple interpretation viable. And unless it's a crazy interpretation, I consider that. And so when I'm grading it, and especially if I'm grading and I give you reports back and you see something weird, you should make this case to me, because I don't want to penalize you guys for something which, like, given this interpretation, you were right. And then, like, you went forward with that. And I didn't specify whether you need to do this or not do that. And the report could have been interpreted, like the manual could have been interpreted multiple ways. So in that case, I'll just take it on a case-by-case basis. It makes it more difficult for me, but at the same time, I don't want to penalize you guys if I don't specify something. I was expecting the uncertainty for the whole class data, but because we had, yeah, that's what I was expecting. So I was expecting you guys to calculate the uncertainty for each individual one. So so obviously the uncertainty is the same for the volumes and masses. And then with the different mass and volumes that you calculate, you're going to have a different, when you propagate the uncertainty, you need to incorporate the actual volume and the actual mass. So it's going to give you a different value. And then you can take the average of that uncertainty and you propose that with the average density that you calculated. That's what I was expecting. Whether you reported that under, it probably wouldn't have been, that's not really group data, that would have been class data, because in order to do that, you have to get all of the group data. So that's what I was expecting. But if there are other legitimate ways to interpret that, then I'll look at it and consider that too. All right, I only have a couple more students to check for attendance, so let me just take care of that. Is anyone in the waiting room? No. But yeah, if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them still. It's your time.
All right, sorry, I had another question. So in the lab manual, like online, it said the uncertainty for the mass and the volume was going to be 0.01 for both of them. But then in the PDF that was on La Lima for the lab, for the volume, in the like little chart, it said plus or minus 0.2. So I didn't know which one to use in the like formula to calculate the uncertainty, to use 0.01 for both of them, or to use 0.01 and 0.2.
The discrepancy was between what? So the PDF online and then something else?
Yeah, and the lab manual online, the volume uncertainty was different in the PDF online and the lab manual.
Well, I didn't know that. I actually only have those PDFs that I give you guys online. So that's what I was expecting. So that's news to me. Maybe just make a note of that. Whichever one you go off of, I would just go off of the stuff online, those PDFs online for now. And then I'll bring this up with Dr. Fuller too. And we'll see what she says. I mean, I'm the one grading it, so I would just expect you guys to use the PDF online and use that as a reference. But yeah, just let me know if you see discrepancy like that, and then I can try to mention it to the class and what to go off of in the future. Because I had no
Okay,
idea.
thank you.
Yeah, there was actually another discrepancy, which was the diameter of the Teflon. But it doesn't, I don't know. I don't think it really matters too much, except when you're looking for the true value of the Teflon ball density and then trying to get your percentage error. But
Yeah. So when you guys are referring to the thing online, the actual data sheet, right? Not just the lab manual resource. Okay. I was thinking like the thing, if you guys got the new lab manual that you got from the bookstore, you're comparing that and then like the lab manual PDF online, and those are different. Yeah, those are probably different because my guess is that was like last minute data given to us from some old experiment. And so there's been an update with the new lab manual, then they didn't update that in the data that was given to you guys. That's my guess, but especially in that case, that actually makes it more of an interesting question because I don't know which one would be more true. But I would just default to using the lab manual. That's the more updated thing anyway.
Hi. I also had some questions for the lab.
Mm-hmm.
The first one may be kind of stupid, but so for the lab number, just making sure do we put down 70341 or do we put down like something else for lab number?
For what? You mean like for the formatting for the title or something?
For like the density table, since you you sent me an email about like how I have to give like an informative title, like lab number, name, and then
that
yeah.
I meant that just for what you submit online, like for the title of your lab report, basically.
I see.
Did that answer your question?
Wait,
For
like is it in the spreadsheet or like outside the spreadsheet?
This is more like just the title of like the documents for the report completely. So if you're talking about the individual tables, yeah, you should give an informative title, but like that, no, you don't need to have that. So if you had table 1.3 results, that's sufficient enough. It's a bit minimalistic, but it's sufficient. Table 1.2 class data, table 1.1 group data. If you want to put group data for density of Teflon ball, great. It's not required, so you can be minimalistic about it. This is more for me. I can't grade you on this. It's just in terms of organizing the files, because we're kind of already doing like a half thing with email and Dropbox. So sorry, I'm not keeping track of the chat very well, but I'm just seeing something in the chat, so I'm going to respond to that just in a second. I would just make your title informative. I really hate giving you guys arbitrary things to follow, arbitrary formats that help me, even though it helps me, because I don't know why. I guess it's a personal problem. But ideally, if you had your name, the report number, and then the date of submission. The date of submission is not necessary, but I usually, whenever I make a document, especially if I'm going to have copies of that document or versions of it, I usually put the date. I learned that actually from postdoc in Arizona. He always used like this international date format. You don't have to do that, but so for an example, if I were to have one, I'd put something like this. I'd have like it's super informative, but it's more for if I were to be referencing this using a programming language. And I would save documents like that just because I have that habit from having to source them. That's not necessary. because I don't want to impose my formatting on you guys, because this is just something that works for me. All I care is that if you have, like what Anna's saying, if you just have lab density 1 in your name, that's sufficient. You might want to tell me that it's the report, but it's assumed because it's their submission for it and your homework was something you do like with the online, with like the long email thing anyway. So yeah, if you want to just be minimalistic, if you just have any kind of combination of lab 1 and name, it'd be nice if the one thing that could be better is maybe let's go with, it doesn't really matter, but let's pick one. I would say let's go with titling lab number first before you put the name. That way, when I have all the documents, I can organize them by lab and then just grade them that way, as opposed to grading individual students and like each of their documents simultaneously. Like I have the lab report for this student, and then I go into the homework, so on and so forth. It makes more sense to do all lab reports at once and then go on. So maybe if you guys can do some variation of lab 1 and name, that'd be perfect. That's all I meant in the email.
I see. Okay. And for when we're exporting like our density table, like how do you want us to like export our table? Is it by like printing it out on Excel, by taking a picture, or like by like scanning it, you know, using like an app like Adobe Scan or Scannable? Like how do you want us to like print our table out once we're finished?
I would say whatever's easiest for you. You could just submit the actual Excel file.
Oh, okay.
You can submit actually submitting the Excel file is probably the best, because then I can go in and analyze things like for formulas. So actually I would go with that. I don't see why that'd be more difficult than taking a picture of something. So yeah, if you have big data sheets on Excel, I would just submit the Excel file so I can go and see. This is helpful for me. I don't know how much I'm going to have especially, but at least the math, it's a bit more streamlined. There you guys have a lot less, well, we'll just see. But it's nice to see like where you guys are getting an error from. Like even myself, when I had the Excel, I had my own version of this and I did all the math, and then I was talking to some students and my numbers were a little bit different. And I found out that on one of my volumes, I had a difference of 1 number, as in instead of 20, it was 19. And that changed everything down. I was a little bit off and I was like, well, so what's the problem? And I found out that it was my problem. And then that's how I was able to fix everything. And then I was able to confirm the results. So that's why having the Excel is useful. But so far, everyone input their formulas correctly. So that wasn't a common problem.
I see. Thank you.
If I submitted it as like a screenshot, should I like upload my actual Excel after this?
If you can, it's helpful. It's just
as like a separate.
Yeah, it's helpful for me for that, for checking the work. In terms of the actual report itself, if I don't want to, if it's for me because I want to be thorough and just see where you guys went wrong, it's also for me to give you the benefit of the doubt. Like I'm going to assume that there's some error somewhere, and I'm going to try to find that error. But I mean, if you just like, let me put this way, I'll give you the choice. It's great if you input that, because then I can do that. If you just send me a screenshot, if I can't find on the screenshot what the problem is, then I'll just indicate that it's wrong. And then I'll tell you, if you ask me what was wrong, I'll tell you I don't know. And we'll need to go look into it in more detail. Whereas if you give me the Excel file, it's easier for me to find that out from the beginning. Also, on a note on this, for grading is going to be a huge pain in the ass for this online thing. Grading is always a pain in the ass, but especially for this. So all the TAs are talking about this, and kind of the formatting that we're talking about is we're just going to have to give you guys grades, and then like what you got off, as in like where you missed points generally. And if you want to know more specific, you should just talk to us. It's just because it's way easier to actually like circle, highlight, this is wrong, show you the math on paper. Doing this electronic document and then saving it and sending it back to you guys is just much more of a hassle. So if you guys are interested in your grade, just like what you had wrong, I mean, I'll work with you. But just keep that in mind in the future. When you go back and look at the grades to see what you did wrong, if you can't find out what was wrong in the first place, like sometimes it's pretty obvious. But if it's not, then email me and then I'll tell you in more detail.
Okay. So do we put it in the Dropbox as well, or do you just share it with you?
I would put in the Dropbox. The Dropbox is way better for organization than emails. If you can, which you should be able to. Oh, so does anyone still have issues with Dropbox? I think one of the common issues I saw was that people are expecting there to be a like individual assignment place to upload.
Yeah, so I created like a density lab folder in the Dropbox, and then I dropped everything in that folder because I had like 3 different things that I dropped in there: the Excel, my lab report, and the worksheet itself. So
was this just for you, like under your name, or is it something in the Dropbox as a whole?
yeah, so in the Dropbox, you can, like, if you go on the action, there's some options in there, and it says create file, and then you can create a folder, and then that's what I did, just so that it's easier for you, like, to have everything more organized. This is all density lab stuff, so I mean, I don't know, I made it easier for you, I feel like.
Yeah, no, that was easier. I just didn't. I never got around to it. And I was just assuming that if you guys already had your names on there, that you could just submit things to your name. So for now, I would just submit things to your name because that's what students have been doing. For the future assignments, for let's say starting lab 2, for the states of matter, I'll make something like that, and then you guys can upload it there. Worst case scenario in terms of Dropbox, here's like your hierarchy. Then try to submit according to the folder that has the report on it. If that's not available for whatever reason, just submit it under your name, and I'll find it. And if that's not possible for whatever reason either, just email it to me, and then I'll find it that way. I know some students had issues with, because there are a couple of students who had issues with Microsoft Excel in particular, and so I recommended they use LibreOffice. Those open source spreadsheet files, they're called ODTs, ODSs. A lot of those have issues being opened by a lot of people. I almost never save anything I use in LibreOffice in their default open source formatting. I usually save it as, like in the case of a text file, as a Word document, or in the case of an Excel, in the calc as an XLSX file. That's really easy to do. Annoyingly, on that LibreOffice, you can't directly save as a PDF like you can on Word, but you can easily just go online and look for .ods to PDF converter and up into it that way. PDFs are universally opened, and they're really easy to look at, and the formatting is saved on there. So I also save even my Excel sheets when I have like tables that are for, like, I make a schedule every semester, for example, and put dates and deadlines on it, and then I'll save it as a PDF, because sometimes it gets corrupted when I try translating to different formats, but the PDF preserves it. So if you guys have issues uploading something, if you're using that, or even Excel, if that happens, or whatever the heck else, if you save as a PDF, that can often fix the problem. Any other questions?
I have a question, Dylan.
Yeah.
Would you be opposed if we made like a Discord channel, and we can just like try and help each other out?
No, I think that's a great idea. Discord's a really nice app. I'm pretty amazed. I'm pretty amazed how well it works. But no, I think you guys should do that. That's actually, yeah, I definitely think you should do that in retrospect. That's something I didn't really have access to as an undergrad. Maybe I did have access to, but I never used it, so I don't think in that way. That's awesome, because a lot of questions get answered or asked the same questions get asked to me by email, and so it's really nice to have basically like one thing that can be referred to. Also, it's nice for you guys to help each other. and you can upload things to like documents. So that's great. Yeah, we should do that.
So I already made a Discord channel. If people wanna come join, I just put it in the chat. That's the invite.
I don't see anything.
You sent it private by accident.
All right, there you go.
Cool. Okay, so that's cool. Let's get that up and running. I think that should help us quite a bit. Thanks. So thanks, Ron. I really appreciate that. Okay, if you guys have any other questions, so like I said before, I want to change it to have your reports due at noon. Just if you need extra time, then you can ask real time. It's just easier to do that and get answers quickly, and I can actually work with you in real time too. Like we can do screen share and we can fix things. So I'll do that. It doesn't matter really because the job, it's like universally open. It's just an arbitrary deadline for me, so I know what is and what isn't late. So if you guys wanna, if there's any modifications you need to make, it sounds like you guys are pretty set in terms of the questions you're asking. But if you want to make any alterations, you can do that, and you can submit at noon. If you're still working on it, you can submit at noon and ask me. You can ask in the chat. You can ask with your voice. You can go on the Discord and ask. So that's that. And if that's everything, then I guess let's move on to this week. In which case, I'm pretty amazed to say that this week seems extremely easy. Basically, as long as you've already, well, let me do it this way. Did everyone submit their homework for this week, the States of Matter homework? Okay.
Yes.
Good. There was no confusion there. All right. I just wanted to make sure. I think the homework makes it quite a bit more sense to do before class. I like the 9:30 deadline for that. The lab report, because those can be more involved, I think it's nice to have the extended deadline. So if you guys are fine with the homework, are there any questions on the homework, or is it pretty simple?
It was pretty simple.
Yeah, it was pretty simple. Okay, that's all.
The explanation portion, was that where we're supposed to do our calculations, to show our calculations, or
This
the
is
last
where,
two questions? Where we had to convert like Celsius to Kelvin and Celsius to Fahrenheit.
and what about it?
There's like a text window. Was that where we're supposed to like show our calculations?
Yeah, that's where you would show your calculations.
Okay, just making sure.
I'll go through it. If there's some issue, kind of like I had for the first homework, and again, if there's still some remaining issue for the first homework, there might be. Let me know. But for the second homework, if there's some issue like that, like if it's like a grading thing, like you didn't like, if there's an arbitrary thing that didn't make sense, and it wasn't like I don't know how to do this. It was like something with the formatting. Let me know, and I can go back and I can change the question key, and I can change in such a way that allows whatever you guys have written to make sense without having to have you resubmit it. Depending. I mean, I can't do everything, but I can do what I can. Okay, well.
But when we turn this in, do we have to turn in another document that shows our calculations?
For the homework?
Oh, no, for the lab or something. I thought that's what you were talking about. No.
For the first lab report?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of outlined in the last section of the lab report, the calculations. You could even have printed that section out and just filled that out and put that in the lab report. To me, it looks like the way they wrote this, this density report out, was that they're kind of writing it out like a worksheet, and then you just fill things out as you go, then you submit that. for whatever reason, we're making you guys submit it as a lab report. I'm guessing that just to get you familiar with the formatting. But that's what we're doing. So yeah, the calculation is just the last section. If you want to answer those directly, like on an individual piece of paper and rewrite the question, that's fine if you want to. But yeah, you do need to show the calculations, at least one. You guys are doing a lot of calculations already on Excel. This is why if you show me the Excel file, I can go back and I can see that you're doing the calculations right or wrong. But like for, let's look at that. For lab report 1, like on just the very first question, you could just show me one. You want to show me one example of that. You could use that for the, yeah, just show me one example of that. Second thing, same for the second question. And then so on and so forth. Generally speaking, if there's a situation in which you need to have a lot of samples and you're doing the same calculation over and over again, I'm totally fine if you guys are just using Excel for that. But show me, like when we're asking you to do the calculation, show me at least one calculation handwritten so that I can see what you're doing and know that you have the right formatting and that you know what you're doing. Does that answer your question?
Right, so is it okay if we submit like a separate just scratch paper of calculations or whatever?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
All right. Well, if you guys have questions later on, let me know. You guys have actually since had lab thing, and then, well, actually after this I had to do tutoring. So you can always log into the tutor session too if you wanted to. So I guess you have like 4 hours. So I hope I'm not copying anything out, but the way they write these lab manuals, and because this is done remotely, I often feel it's a little bit redundant for me to go through it because you're gonna have to go through it anyway. So with that being said, the most important thing to know for this, I sent you guys an email just before class started, so you don't have to retype that out, or if you're having some difficulty with that, then you can just click that. This is a simulation lab, something I found out this morning. It's actually put at the very, very end of the syllabus for those who are attentive enough to see that. The simulation lab reports are a little bit different and much to your guys' favor and to my favor too, for everyone's favor. They are shorter. Basically, the report for this week is to fill out this. So starting after the homework section on page 25 to page 28, you just answer the questions and you can submit that. If you want to rewrite that on an individual piece of paper and submit that, you can do that. Or if you want to print that out and write that in there, that's also fine. Of course, you just need to draw it out manually and write out the stuff where possible. But otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward lab. I mean, I'll run through it too with you guys, like once we get started, like once all the questions for the most part are answered, and I just like have you guys go do it. I'll keep the Discord open, but I'll try running through the simulations too, just to make sure, you know, everything's fine. It should be, but just in case I find anything wrong too, something that'd be helpful, then we'll go through it together. But to me, it seems a really, really straightforward and pretty basic. This is what I would have expected for the first week of lab. I'm not sure why they didn't do this to kind of warm us up. And no, the pre-lab is not required for simulations. So as per the syllabus, it says at the very end, you just need to have the objective, which is part of the pre-lab, results, calculations, conclusions, and questions. So basically, it's just like a slightly different format because you answer all these questions. The only part of the pre-lab that remains is the objective, but that's a sentence. That's really straightforward. And the other components are, well, let's look at this lab in particular, just to see if they're using the same names for the sections. Yeah, basically you were still running a report. You're still kind of writing a report because you still need to include a results section. The calculations for the most part, should be already within the simulation, like within the worksheet. If I find something else that you need to add separately, or if there's any other calculations you need to do that's outside of this, and if you just do it on scratch paper and you indicate what this is for, like which individual problem, what the physical properties are, like calculation of, you know, whatever the thing is, you show me units, that's fine. The conclusion question goes on to the results. So the results are like the numerical response to the objective. The conclusions is your written out response, like this thing was found with this much, whatever, if there's statistics involved, this thing was learned, whatever these tools were applied, and so on and so forth. The questions in this case are pretty straightforward. Most of the worksheet are questions.
Right, so just like as a general like rule of thumb, like if it's a simulation, we don't have to do the pre-lab.
Yeah, I would have told you guys this before, but I didn't know that either. I found that out at 7 a.m. So sorry. If you did the pre-lab, it's great. It's not going to hurt you. Yeah, you can submit the pre-lab too, of course. So you're missing the you don't need to have the background and procedure portions or data.
So what about the summary and the conclusion? Do we need to do that still?
You still need to do that for some reason. Shouldn't say for some reason. I will when I go through this too with you guys, maybe I can try to write something out too that would make sense. But yeah, the summary is also, it's a good thing for you guys. It's also good for me in terms of grading because I can kind of see, I can gauge your understanding. Consider that I often sometimes get frustrated with the Gen Chem labs because a lot of things seem a little bit silly, but because this is not real, because we are not chemists yet, we are still learning. So we are basically preparing to do things. So we're still trying to get lab format as much as possible because not only will you be using those lab formats later on in other chemistry courses, but ultimately if you stay within the scientific world, you're going to be following these formats later on. So that getting the training earlier than later is going to help us. And yes, Olivia, and then also the objective. So the objective and summary are like the intro and conclusion. They should reflect one another. The objective says, this is what I'm going to do. Your summary says, this is what I did. This is how I accomplished it. Both of those are really good. They're good for me too, though, in terms of grading, because I can see like, okay, the student knows what they're talking about. They know what they did, and they have a strong grasp on this. So they actually are, outside of just like preparing for life, they actually are useful inherently for these like reports still too. Any other questions? All right, well, so if you guys have questions, just let me know. It's initially when we first ran this, when we were first talking about the Zoom meetings, without having a certain license, you can't run more than like 50 minutes or something, but it seems like I can. So I'm just gonna probably take myself out the video and mute myself. And then I'll go through this report too and try to troubleshoot it, see if I find any problems. If you guys have questions, you can open up in the chat, or you can ask directly, or you can leave. I'm still gonna do a post-lab discussion thing, like I guess 11:30, that was still the preparation. I mean, that's still the plan. So if you guys leave, we should come back for that. It'd be good for you, just so you can we can reiterate what to do next week, and you can ask last minute questions for whatever you're interested in. Jacob, the difference is the results are just numbers usually, and or it's like the quantitative conclusion. So for last week, for example, you're trying to determine the density. So your results are the density with the uncertainty. And then the conclusion is going to be also addressing the quantitative result, but it will be discussing the method. For Gen Chem, you probably need to talk about you could actually for last week, you can talk about the confidence of your results, because you actually get that with the confidence interval, and you can kind of gauge how accurate you are. It's not necessary. The conclusion basically reiterates the results. The conclusion tells you, or you answer the question of the objective in the results. I mean, in the conclusion. So the objective was, how do I find, what is this? Your conclusion says, this is this as per the results. We found it with this method. We are confident in this. If you want to include like what you learned, that's great. In general, I think one of the best things to put for a conclusion, I don't know how relevant it is for Gen Chem, is error analysis. That's really, really, really helpful for me. It's really helpful for you. Again, it's really weird for this because, I mean, you guys were given data, so the error analysis is not super relevant. But in general, when we're actually doing experiments, it's huge because things always go wrong. I mean, you guys are kind of lucky and also unfortunate, and you're not experiencing the frustration of everything going wrong all the time in lab, because that's the majority of what's happening when we're actually taking these labs is there's always something going wrong, and it's really annoying, and we have to fix it. And so when you analyze the results, you're going to say, we got this, but this could be wrong because of this physical thing that happened when I was doing the experiment. So as much as you can do an error analysis, it's really helpful too, because if I see some discrepancy in what you wrote down, and you talk about your error analysis, it also helps me grade usually more favorably, because I see like, okay, the student knows they may have done something wrong, which shows me that you know what you know it. You don't know how to do it, but you know that it's wrong. That's still knowledge, right? So that's always a good thing to put if you can. And yeah, you can print out this lab and just fill it out. That's fine. John. So, okay.
So one quick question: how do you want us to? This lab is kind of funny. How do you want us to like draw it out? Do we just like use circles to represent the atoms, or do you want us to use like Lewis structure?
How far have you gone in lecture for molecular structure?
I'm actually not in 161 class this term.
Okay.
I just took the lab, so.
I would definitely not worry about that. I would basically just follow whatever is given to you in the States. They kind of show you. I'm just looking at the very first one, for example, but they give you neon, argon, oxygen, and water. They actually are showing you molecular structure here, and it's not irrelevant. So neon and argon are showing you noble gases, so they're showing you individual atoms. And then for oxygen, they're showing you the diatomic molecule, which is elemental oxygen. And then in water, they're showing you the hydrogens with water. Let me look at this to see if I could commit just the circle.
Well, I was just going off the the homework quiz or whatever we had for this, and the drawings on there are pretty specific. So that's why I was like, especially like the ice, the solid H2O, it even had the intermolecular forces in there, the hydrogen bond, like as dashed lines. So I was like, that's why I'm wondering like how specific do you want these drawings to be?
Yeah, I think I remember actually someone talking about this, another TA talking about this. That to me is completely not expected. I don't know why you guys would be expected to know that if you don't know that. Let me go back to see why they included that. I think they included that just to like, there's something I see, at least here, but sometimes in academics in general, of and I think they kind of do this density lab, where like they kind of throw you over the deep end to show you how deep you can go. I mean, you can go really deep. Take it as a grad student, and I'm still very basic and towards the beginning, there you can go so deep. It is crazy. I don't know how useful that is to overwhelm students, but for whatever reason, sometimes that is an attractive policy in academics where they show you, oh, you think you know something, but do you actually know it? So I don't know why they did that. For me, in terms of grading it, I think as long as you just show me the molecules as shown in the simulation, that's all I would expect.
Okay.
And if there's something in the grading key that's showing you the hydrogen bonds, I mean, I just, once again, I guess I need to if that's, yeah. I don't expect that. I'm only gonna expect you guys to know what you've learned. And if they teach it to you in a manual, fine, whatever. At least you guys know it. But if you haven't been taught it, even though this is a very common experience for me, I don't think that's fair to grade you guys on something that you haven't been taught. That's just kind of stupid in my opinion. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So Anna, yeah, you guys can go do it now. And you can come back at 11:30. I'm just gonna keep the Zoom running in case anyone has questions real time, as if it was like an actual lab. But you guys don't have to be here for that. The watermark, Helen, so can you show me an example of that? Is it kind of like that thing when you have like shutter mark, whatever, it has like something written across it? Is that what you mean? Did anyone else have that problem?
I don't have a printer, but when you look at it, the PDF, there's no watermark, but I haven't tried printing anything out yet.
Maybe they're doing that as like a copyright thing. It's pretty annoying though. If a PDF from Lima works, then it works. Otherwise, I don't know. I haven't tried it. I can look up something though. I mean, I'm going to trust John and say that does work. I can look up something if there's some way that you can have removed. There are a lot of programs, just if you look up online, that can help you. They can convert it to something else. And if you convert it to that thing, you're not going to, it's going to eliminate the code that would put the watermark on there when it's printed. I don't know in particular what that would be because I have not used it, but there's probably some resource out there for you if that Lima PDF thing doesn't work. Jacob, I would still include calculations and Excel data. So like I was saying earlier, for the Excel, you should, for the calculations, just show me one example. Basically, you're just handwriting it so that I know you're doing it right. Of course, you also do the calculation in Excel, so it does seem redundant, but it's much easier to analyze it on paper, and that's also what you're required to do. And for John, pencil's okay. As long as I can see it, it's fine.